Alicia Simpson, and happy holidays from Mission Control, guys.
Happy holidays to you.
We're ready for your questions whenever you are.
Sure. Well, I'll have our first student come up, and our first student is Olivia.
Hi, Olivia.
Hi, Olivia. Hi. What is done for the astronauts to keep them in touch with their families here on Earth?
We're having a hard time hearing you, so you guys need to speak up a little bit. We can see you here as well, but I think we already know what your question was, Olivia.
Okay.
Olivia, did you ask me about their families?
Yes, I did.
Okay. It's kind of, it's challenging for them. Just imagine if you were away from your family for long periods of time. So, but we have really good things in place here at NASA for them to be able to do video conferences with them, like you're doing with me, to be able to call down and talk to them on the phone. So they're always in contact with their family, but no one wants to be away from their family for a long period of time. But we make sure that they are able to do that.
The really cool thing is that we have so many different ways of communicating with the crews now on orbit. That we have email, which is a way a lot of parents keep in touch with their kids anyway these days, especially when they've grown up and gone away to college and the like. We've got special sessions where we use net meeting, kind of like a FaceTime or a Skype, where they can talk directly and see each other in the time that they're doing that. And they have a telephone up there that is an IP phone where they can actually call down and talk to their family members directly. So there's all those different ways that they have chances to communicate both visually through writing and through audio means. And so it's a little bit like being away on a long business trip for the crews. And so they miss their families and their families miss them, but they still have lots of opportunities to stay close.
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
We have our next student, Jordan Perry.
Hi.
Hello.
How does this spacesuit work?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Could you speak up?
And I think she said, how does the spacesuit work?
Oh, wow. That's a really loaded question. Kelly, do you want to try to tackle that?
Well, the spacesuits we use for the U.S., there's two different kinds of spacesuits, first of all. There's a U.S. spacesuit, a NASA spacesuit we call the Extravehicular Mobility Unit. And there's a Russian one that we call the Orlan. And they're very similar because essentially what they are is a personal spaceship. And they provide all of the protection from the outside environment around space that you would need if you were actually in a spaceship, but it allows you to move about and use your arms and to do important tasks that we need to do to maintain the space station, or they did a lot of it to assemble the space station in the first place. And so what you've got is inside the spacesuit you have a liquid cooling garment, because in spite of the fact you might think space is cool, actually all the work that you do in it can build up a lot of heat, and we've got really good insulation in the spacesuit. And so one of the hardest things you have to do is get rid of all that excess heat. And so there is a liquid cooling garment that has lots of tubing with water, and they can, with a little dial on the front of their spacesuit, they can adjust the temperature of the spacesuit so that they can stay comfortable and work. They've got a little mouth water delivery system so that they can take a drink, because they're usually out there for 6.5 or more hours. And so it's very important that they be able to stay rehydrated. They have a multi-layer spacesuit that provides pressure for them, and it also provides protection against the thermal environment and, to some level, tiny pieces of space junk, that sort of thing. And then the gloves are really important on the spacesuits, because when you're out there doing work, your hands are your most important thing. And engineers here at Johnson Space have done a lot of work over the years to make these gloves protective enough, but also nimble enough that you can do a lot of the tight work that you have to do when you're connecting connectors for electrical connections, or connecting fluid connections are associated with the cooling systems on the space station. So, and that's basically how it works. You have your oxygen tanks, you have electricity that powers the systems of the suit, and once you go outside, you're in your own little spacesuit.
Mhm.
Hi, I'm Caitlin, and I have a question for the mission control.
Okay.
My question is, are there regular routines followed in mission control?
Are there what in mission control?
Regular routines followed in mission control.
Regular routines followed in mission control.
Yes. Okay. Yes, there are regular routines. Yes, they're daily operations. They have to get up. They have to talk to the flight directors. They have meetings and figure out what the tasks are for today. And they are, and then they go through what the plan is for the day. The day is already planned out, and so the flight control team is working with the crew on board, and they're making sure that they try to stay as close to being on tasks as possible. And so they do follow a daily routine, and it's planned out ahead of time, for the most part.
Yeah, interestingly though, we're working on new ways to keep from having to have mission control be so directly involved in everything that the crews do on orbit. The crews like to be somewhat autonomous so that they can choose when they get their work done and when to work on one thing versus another thing. And it's also important that we learn how to do that without having to have mission control there for everything, because as we go farther out into space, there are delays in communication that will occur. And you don't want to have to wait half an hour when you're at Mars to get an answer from mission control before you can go on to the next step. And so lately they've been doing some special work. Earlier this week they did work on the treadmill system on board the space station, and they updated the procedures so that Kevin Ford, the commander right now, could do it virtually on his own without having to ask mission control questions and the like. And so while there is a very structured routine for the crew on board, they're also are looking at new opportunities where we can minimize that so that the crews can go to the office and do their job without having to have somebody explain how to do things all day long. The other part of that is that the folks here in Mission Control have a schedule. We work here in Mission Control 24/7, 365 days a year. And so that means that there are 3 shift of flight controllers that work every day, and they cover about an 8-hour shift each one, and then they have a handover period so that the folks who are leaving can tell the status of all the systems and things that we have to do to the folks that are coming on, and then then that crew member does the same thing for the oncoming crew. And so we keep a rotating crew in it, make sure that everybody's up to date, everybody knows the important items, and that everybody's ready to support the crew on orbit.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
And our next question is from Athena.
Hi, Athena.
Hi. How do you preserve food in space? How often do the astronauts get fresh fruit and veg?
Oh yeah, they would love to get it more often, but they can only get it when there's a vehicle that can bring it to them. But as far as the food being on station, they have some of the regular stuff that you eat here on Earth: granola bars, M&Ms, things like that. And it doesn't require anything special for them to have that type of thing. But they do also have food that's freeze dried that they need to be rehydrated. When they're up there, and so those have kind of a shelf life of about a year, year and a half, and they really enjoy the food. They get to taste it on the ground before they go up into space, actually. So they get to kind of pick out their menus and decide what they think they might like to eat for 6 months since they're going to be there. So it's kind of fun. They get to do food tastings and kind of pick their own menu.
Yeah, a lot of things that they have on the space station to eat are the same kind of things that you could go to the grocery store and buy. Thermostabilized meals. I know there's some really good ones out there that you can just buy, and you can stick them in your pantry, and you don't have to refrigerate them or freeze them or anything, and you can heat them up in the microwave. They have different ways of heating them on the space station. They don't have a microwave, but they do have that capability to eat the same kind of things you would eat here on the ground. But the folks here in Mission Control and in our food laboratory also do a lot of work to make sure that the nutritional components of the diet are really healthy. And we're learning more and more. There's a special experiment called Pro-K right now where doctors on the ground are looking at how the nutritional components of their food that they eat affect their long-term health and their reaction to microgravity. We're finding out that some of the things that you would think might be the expected behavior, such as eating a lot of protein, would be good for you, when really it may end up not being as good for you. And so we're working on how to fine-tune the diets so that they can keep good muscle health, and that their bones don't deteriorate. And that goes right along with exercise, which is very important to make sure they stay healthy and they can return to one gravity and be able to be healthy when they come home.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And I should add that Chris Hadfield has said he's bringing some special treats up to the crew. On his, they're about ready to dock with the space station tomorrow, and so whenever a new crew comes up, they bring lots of special treats, and some of those treats are fresh fruit and special things like chocolate and other things. So we don't know exactly what they're bringing, but we know that the crew that's on board is going to get some special holiday surprises.
Yes, I'm sure there'll be maple involved.
Oh, Maple. That's right. He is from Canada, isn't he?
Right, yes.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth. The question is, how do you keep the astronauts from feeling lonely or isolated in space?
Oh, wow. Yes, they are, because they are able to speak with their families, and there's more than one of them on board at all times. There's always constant interaction with one another. They have what's called like a crew web page, and they're able to select movies and, some of their favorite movies and television shows that they like to watch here on the ground. They're able to do that and read, newspapers, and they're able to still kind of keep up with world events and everything. So they don't feel, too isolated. You don't want them to feel like they're completely out of touch. And so there are ways we have a whole team of people that their job is to make sure that the crew doesn't feel lonely or isolated while they're in space.
Right. And they also have regular conferences with, for example, their boss here at the ground, Bob Bacon, is the lead astronaut, and he has a regular conference with the crew. And then, we work in shifts here in Mission Control, but for every expedition, there is a lead flight director. And Chris Edelin is the lead flight director for Expedition 34 right now, and he has a weekly tag up with them. And he can actually bring friends and colleagues that are particularly close to the crew members in, and they do a two-way conversation just like this, where they can see and hear each other and do that. So in addition to keeping them up together with their families, they also have their friends and colleagues that they work with day to day an opportunity to get up there. And one other thing they have is they do have access to the internet directly. It is not the fastest communication line that you've ever seen, but they can actually go out and look online, and they could even order flowers for their wives for their anniversary, or send down a special birthday present through one of the online ordering systems to their children.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, we're going to have the students speak a little bit closer to the computer. I think that will help you out a little bit.
Hi, my name's Kristen, and my question is, how many people work in mission control?
Oh, gosh, I don't know exactly how many.
Okay,
'cause it
generally there
fluctuates.
are about 20 or 30 people in here during a normal workday shift for the crew. The crew wakes up about midnight Houston time, and then they go to bed around 3:30 in the afternoon Houston time. And so from those periods, we have a full team of flight controllers here. And that's around 20 or 30 people. And then there are some additional folks that are in support rooms that are nearby here that provide specialized input to the team here that's in what we call the front room. And then we also have an opportunity to pull in specialists from the research area and principal investigators. And those folks mainly come in through the Payload Operations Center in Huntsville, Alabama, where NASA has the Marshall Space Flight Center, and they coordinate all the research activities. So there's lots of different ways that that occurs.
experiments are done on the space station?
So many.
There are some, you know,
So many.
at any given time, there are between 150 and 200 different experiments going on the space station. Some of them involve crew involvement. Some of them are done by investigators here on the ground working remotely. There are 3 different laboratories on the space station. There's the NASA Destiny Laboratory, there is the European Space Agency's Columbus Laboratory, and there's the Japanese Space Agency's Kibo Laboratory, and Kibo means hope in Japanese. And so we have all these different experiments, and there's an International Space Station Program Science Office that is based here in Houston, and they work with the folks at Marshall in Huntsville, Alabama, to coordinate all the different experiments. And among the experiments they do, a lot of it is biological experiments. They use the crew members themselves as test subjects, and so they will do different types of exercise, or they will look at different displays on a laptop computer and have to respond to it. They will record their daily intake of whatever foods they ate, and keep journals of their moods and things that they feel and how they are. And so they do all that, and then there's other biological experiments that involve things like fish and mice, spiders and butterflies. Right now they're working today, Kevin Ford was working with the Medaka fish experiment, which is these tiny little fish, and there's a small aquarium on board the space station. And these little fish have, of course, skeletal systems, because we all know that fish have skeletons just like humans do, they're just a lot smaller. And so, but because fish have faster metabolisms and don't live as long, the effects of microgravity on their bones happens a lot faster than it does for us. And so the researchers are looking at those fish bones to find out what longer duration space flight for humans, how that might affect our skeleton systems. Because that's one of the things we've noticed, is that when you live on board the space station for 5-6 months, you tend to lose bone mass. Now we're learning that certain types of exercise can really help us keep that from happening, and we're actually getting really close to the point where we have 0 loss of bone density on the space station. But you can imagine, a lot of people have a thing called osteoporosis when you get older. I don't know if your grandparents may have any of this yet, but it means your skeleton is a little bit weaker, and you tend to have broken bones, or a lot of people have broken hips and things like that as they get older. And we're working on learning how that affects astronauts, because it happens at a lot faster rate, and we're hoping we can translate that to things that you can help people on the ground. Now, there are plant experiments. We were looking at the difference in the way plants grow on the ground and in space. There are experiments as to how fire works. And, you know, fire on a space station, since it's an enclosed environment, is a very dangerous thing. And that's part of the things you train them for, is how to put out fires and how to react quickly.
Right. Yes.
But it also can help us make engines run more efficiently, whether it's car engines or jet engines here on Earth. There's experiments into how to recycle things. I don't know if you know this, but the water that the crew members on the space station drink used to be their urine. So they went to the bathroom, and then that went through a special filtration system that does essentially what the Earth itself does in about 5,000 years, but it takes about a week or two to recycle yesterday's coffee into tomorrow's coffee, as one of our astronauts used to say. And so we test things like that. There are also important things looking at things like bacteria. Researchers have found out that there is a specific gene in some bacteria that turns on and off its ability to make you sick. And so if we can apply that, this particular one was salmonella, which causes food poisoning. If we can apply those lessons to treatments here on the ground, we could virtually wipe out people getting food poisoning on Earth, and that would be a really help, because a lot of people die or get very, very sick every year around the world from that kind of a problem. So very different lines of research. And I should not I need to also look at astronomy because we have the alpha magnetic spectrometer that is collecting strange particles as the space station orbits the Earth. It takes advantage of the big solar rays and electricity to do that. And we're expecting that to actually rewrite the astronomy textbooks here soon if you like to study the stars, because it's going to teach us all about dark matter and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're
Now,
welcome.
Alicia, I know we were supposed to go to 12:15. I don't want to take too much more of your time. Do you have time for another question or two, or is this it?
We've got time for one more question.
We'll give you one last more question. This is from Josiana.
Hi, I'm Jenna. Was working for NASA a dream of the mission controllers or astronauts?
Well, it's very interesting that you asked that question because when I was a little girl, I thought I would never be able to work at NASA because to me, I thought it was unreachable. But, I was encouraged by my teachers, especially, and by my parents that, never say that anything is impossible as long as you try to do your best. And I took a different avenue. I didn't major in astronomy or anything like that, but I did apply the knowledge that I did receive in school to what I do now, and it's perfect. And so I would just encourage you that don't limit yourself. Don't ever think that I'm not really into science or my strong point might be something else, and so therefore I wouldn't make it in any particular field because you have so many talents inside of you that are just waiting to come out. So for me, I thought I could never do it, and here I am, and I would never dream of being anywhere else. I absolutely love being here.
Come on, Alicia, you have to tell them what you studied.
Okay. So my degree is actually in criminology. So that just goes to show you. Here it is. I thought I would be, FBI, CIA, and instead here I'm working with these great crew members and flight controllers and flight directors. So you never know where your education will lead you.
That's right. And, I took a different path too. I've been working at NASA for 26 years now. I remember getting to stay home from kindergarten to watch Alan Shepard launch when the very first American went into space. And I've always had a real interest in space, but I never thought, I wanted to be an astronaut and all that, but I was too tall at the time, and then I needed to wear glasses. Of course, I wear contacts now and things like that, so I never thought I could do it. And I was a reporter and an editor for 10 years before I got an opportunity to come work at NASA, and now I've been here for 26 years, and it's been a really rewarding career. So my point is that just study what you need. You get a good general education,
Right.
and that will set you up for just about anything you want to do in life. And if it ends up being working at NASA, remember that not everybody has to be an astronaut. There are all kinds of people that support in many different ways. There are business people that keep the budgets running for us so that we can do the things we do. There are flight controllers that support the crews here on the ground. There are people like Alicia that help coordinate the training that's so important to them doing their jobs well. There are people like me that help share it with people like you and people like Michael Hare, who's helping us do this telecon today, who are useful. And there are human resources people that make sure that we have all the right people to do the jobs that need to be done. So just remember that you should follow what you like to do,
Right.
because life is too short to be doing something just for the paycheck. You should be doing something that you enjoy doing, and if that ends up being a NASA, we would welcome you into our family and love to have you here.
Absolutely.
Alicia, thank you so very, very much for giving us this time spent with you. We know how valuable your time is, and I can't begin to tell you what a thrill it has been for us here at Christ King School in our little town of Rutland, Vermont, to be able to have this opportunity to speak with people in mission control. It really is very inspiring to all of us. Thank you very much. Can we give them all a big thank you?
Thank you. Thank you. I've really enjoyed the time we've spent together today.
Thanks a bunch to you guys and to also everybody in the Digital Learning Network that helps make
Yes.
these connections possible. We love doing it, and we hope you guys have a safe, happy, healthy holiday season.